Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another inner hour. Sure appreciate it. Um, I'm going to take a moment and invite you to do the same, to just pause, kind of collect my attention as maybe you collect yours, and relax for the next hour. I know, Allison, I got your message. Thank you. Hope you enjoy your time and travels and everything's safe and you have a good time. And thank you for joining us tonight for however long you can. So let's just take a moment and focus on letting go of whatever else may be going on and being present here together for the next hour. So I'm lighting my little candle here. Ta-da. Yes, I am. By the way, I'm aware I could light that before we start and not have that part, take up time. But part of the idea is for you to take time to do whatever you do on your inwardly or outwardly on your side to just give yourself the spiritual space that you need, the emotional and mental space you need to really be present and to not get caught up in whatever else may be troubling you or occupying your mind. So thank you for joining us. All righty. So tonight I am starting a new topic, which actually will be a series. I'm not sure how long the series will be. I would appreciate feedback after tonight or even next week, whatever. Some feedback from any of you who are here so that you can let me know if this is it's an area that I'm personally very interested in, which means I can get carried away on things I'm interested in. So if it's really turns out to be something that you don't have interest in or find, boring as dirt or something, then you can let me know. And I won't drag on the series too long, hopefully. But anyway, I'm glad you're joining us tonight, and I appreciate it. And I've said this before, but not all of you are here all the time. So just a reminder that at any point in what I'm teaching, you're welcome to ask a question or make a comment to the group, and you can do that in one of two ways. Most of you are familiar with Zoom by now, but there is a little on the bottom menu bar of most of your Zoom screens. It'll say raise hand, and then a little hand icon appears by your participant name. I will see that and eventually, hopefully, see it and eventually call on you. And you can also do it simply by turning on your microphone and at some point, saying something, and then we'll pause and listen to whatever you have to ask or to share. You are welcome to have your cameras on the whole time if you like. I personally wish people would do that because I like seeing people and I like seeing who's here. And I think a lot of other people have mentioned to me they would like to see your faces. So if you don't want to have your camera on, of course, you're not obligated to, but you're very welcome to, and some of us appreciate that. But I would like it if you'd leave your microphones muted until you have something to share, because there's often background noise. People may not realize that their clock is really loud, or their dog is barking, or that somebody in the house is talking and it's picking up. So keeping your mic muted until you actually have something you want to say to the group or to me is helpful, but the cameras, please have them on the whole time if you like. Alrighty, so that's that. So the new topic tonight, and for at least next week, and I'm thinking a little longer than that, is what Jesus, whom I call Yeshua. So I may use those interchangeably. I use Jesus because it's a much more familiar name to most people. His name in Hebrew is Yeshua. And so that's how I think of him, and that's the name I use. If you're unfamiliar with that, I'm talking about Jesus when I say that name. I don't typically call the other disciples by their Hebrew names, although I could. It would just be more confusing for most people. And they're not, and we're mostly not talking about them, at least at this point, we're mostly talking about Yeshua. So uh, if we do a study on the disciples at some point, then I'll definitely let you know what their actual names were as opposed to all the anglicized versions in the English New Testament. All right, so the subject is what did Yeshua and his apostles really teach? And that's something that's very interesting to me for many reasons. And I know to some of you for sure it is. Partly because for me, he's a very important figure. And I think one of the greater, if not greatest, spiritual figure in our history on this planet. That's my opinion, of course. But the question itself is how do we, what they taught. The question arises, how do we even know that? How can we know that? The obvious answer for most traditional Christians is, well, whatever it says in the Bible. Okay, that's fine. That's a matter of faith. But if you really know much at all about how the Bible was composed, it was not written by the hand of God on fiery letters and parchment paper or something. It was written by human beings, I believe, inspired by God, but it wasn't even written at one time. And it was not written as a book. It was a collection of things. The first 5 books of Moses, called the Torah, which means teachings, not law, those were written all together, basically, not at the same time, but as a collection. And then the prophets were written one at a time about the individual prophets. And those two things initially formed the sacred scriptures during Yeshua's time. There was no Jewish Bible or Hebrew Bible. There was none. There was no New Testament. There was no Bible, period. And biblios, by the way, which is the Greek word, means books. So the Bible itself was put together over a very long period of time by multiple different people. And there were arguments, particularly with the New Testament section, for hundreds of years on what should and shouldn't be included in that scripture. People made those decisions. And so we have in this country, when we say the Bible, we think that's it, that's the Bible everybody uses. And it isn't. If you're a Protestant, you have a Bible that has, for example, the 27 books in your New Testament. And then if you count what you call the Old Testament, which is the Jewish Bible, basically, you end up with a total of 66 books. If you are Catholic, you have a different Bible, and you have books and sections in your Bible that are not in the Protestant Bible. And if you are Ethiopian, which is the oldest continuous existing Bible, if you have that Bible, it has 81 books in it. So there's not a Bible in the first place. But nevertheless, that is the primary source of information about Yeshua and his apostles. There are others, and a lot of people don't know there are, and that's some of what we're going to get to in this series. First of all, there's historical accounts. The Jewish historian Philo writes about Yeshua. Josephus writes about Yeshua, and he also writes more extensively about John the Baptist, whom he said had a much larger following. There are then early so-called church fathers that were also historians, like Origen and Eusebius. These are all like first, second, third century, which is considered fairly early. And Tertullian and Irenaeus and others, most of whom would not like any of the material that I'm going to be presenting tonight. Those were the people that basically formed what became Christian orthodoxy and started defining what was the right belief, orthodoxy, and what was false, which was heresy. Heresy, in case you don't know, is also a Greek word, and it doesn't mean false, and it doesn't mean wrong, and it doesn't mean satanic. Heresy means choice in Greek, that you're making a different choice than the traditional viewpoint. So, but there are other writings about Jesus that are in that basic time period of 40 years after his death, which is the earliest gospel we have, that's Mark, to about 100 to 150 years after his death. In that time period, there's a lot written about him that did not make it into the Bible that we still have, that still exists. We know what those texts say. Some of those texts were non-canonical gospels, the Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Philip, Gospel of Mary Magdalene, a number of books that did not make it into the New Testament, although some of them were included in the early versions of the New Testament before what's called the canonization, where everything was fixed, nothing else was added, nothing else was taken away. And that did not happen until after the reign of Constantine. During the reign of Constantine is when that started. It finalized even later than that. So we're talking 300 to 400 years after Jesus' life until the New Testament itself was like, okay, this is it. This is the right stuff. These are the real books that have the right view of him, and everything else you shouldn't look at. So there's all those. And then there's two other really, really historically important ones that most Christians have never heard of, unless they do biblical study. One is called the Gospel of Hebrews. It's also called the Gospel of Ebionites. And I will talk about more. They're the same thing. The Gospel of Ebionites and the Gospel of Hebrews is the same thing. And that does not exist anymore. We only have 7 fragments of what that was, and a number of letters from early followers of Yeshua and from some of these early church fathers who talk about and describe the gospel of the Ebionites, describe the belief systems of the Ebionites and who they were and where they went, and describe their book that was called the Gospel of Hebrews or the Gospel of Ebionites. So we'll get to that in this series also. And it's really interesting to me because it has an absolute direct tie to Jesus and his successors. His successors, historically speaking, again, matters of faith are matters of faith. People believe what they want to believe. But historically, Peter and Paul absolutely did not take over the Jesus movement after his death. And the apostolic lineage through Peter of the Catholic Church is historically groundless. But again, if you're Catholic and that's something you believe, then you do. And that doesn't mean there aren't wonderful things about the Catholic Church. His brother James is actually the one that was entrusted to take over his leadership after he died, which he did until he himself was martyred. That's another story. We'll get to some of that as well. But tonight, I'm going to talk about a particular collection that you may not be familiar with. And it's, from a biblical scholar standpoint, very important. It's called the Didache, Didache. It's a Greek word, and it means teachings. The reason it was called the Didache is because the title of the work is the teachings of the 12 apostles. It is a collection of the teachings of the apostles after Jesus' death and the body of teaching that they continued to promote through their lives. And we know about the Didache. Initially, we knew about it from writings, again, letters and historical references from early historians and writers. And you can research this online. It's very accessible stuff, but it's a long list of people. So I'm not going to bore you with all the history. You can look that up, or all the individual names of where these people who referred to it. But the Didache, or Teachings of the 12 Apostles, is referred to a lot in the 1st and 2nd centuries. And it didn't exist. We did not have it. We only had references to, there once was a book that was called a manual or a handbook that had the teachings of the 12 apostles of Yeshua. And if you wanted to become part of the Yeshua community, they gave you this book. This is after Jesus is dead now, we're talking, when James was running things, and then after James too. This was used for a very long time. And the book which I will get into tonight, has a section summarizing the things you were expected to understand and believe if you wanted to be part of the Yeshua community. And it has a section on what you are to do, how you're to live, and how you're not to live if you want to be a member of their community. So it's like a community handbook or a community manual. If you had lived back then, after Jesus is gone, maybe you lived in 75 or 80 AD and you wanted to join this Jesus movement, even though Jesus himself is now gone, and you came to one of them and said, "So I want to be part of this," they would give you the Didache and say, "You need to study this and see if this works for you, if this aligns with you." They wouldn't have said those words. But if you can accept this, and then this is the standard of living. This is the code of living we expect from people in our community. And if you're not willing to do this code, then you can't be part of the community. It was not an open door policy, so to speak. Um, so that's kind of what the Didache is. And it did not exist either until the mid 1800s. And then it was found in its entirety by archaeologists. It was then uh, assembled and preserved and copied and translated and so on and so forth. And so now we have the complete text of that, and you can read it in English and you can look at it online, and you can download it, you can get it. There are books written about it that have it contained in the book. It's pretty accessible. It's just not widely known, especially in traditional circles. And one of the reasons it's not widely known in traditional circles is because, again, it's problematic for fundamentalist Christians because it does not promote or advocate some of the things that became key things in Christianity. It does not do that. And this is predates organized Christianity. So it's earlier than that. So it's probably, from a historical standpoint, much more aligned with what Yeshua actually taught. So what Yeshua and his apostles actually taught, one of the ways we can probably know that fairly accurately, or at least get a picture of what that might have looked like, is by studying this manual that we know from multiple sources were created early on and were passed around the communities of people as kind of the handbook of the community. That was common in those days. I've talked before in another series about the Essene movement, and the Essenes were a Jewish messianic sect at the time of predating Jesus, actually, starting in about 200 BC, but still existing in his day, and had a large community presence at the Dead Sea in Qumran and some other places as well. If you wanted to become part of the Essene group, they had something they called the Manual of Discipline. We have that too from excavations around Qumran. We have a lot of their writings. Those were discovered in the late 40s, and those writings completely transformed historical understanding of the Jesus time period. Prior to the discoveries of the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran, um, historians knew next to nothing about Jewish practices and life in that era of Israel. And now the tremendous amount is known. Other archaeological discoveries have been made as well that shed a lot of light on that and are continuing to be made. But the Dead Sea Scrolls really just radically changed our understanding of that time period. And they had a manual of discipline as well, that here's what you do, here's what you don't do, here's what we believe, here's what we follow, this is the code, uh, and so on. So it was a common practice in spiritual groups of that era. So the Didache itself, I want to get into talking about here with you tonight, and we'll get to some of these other sources and touch on some of the history as it relates to some of this again. And how I'm going to do this is read you parts of it, and then I'm going to share some of what that how I understand it based on my studies and based on my own experience. Uh, and then I'll read you some more, and we'll kind of go on like that. So when I was saying it was discovered in the mid 1800s, it was actually 1873, if you want to be exact, and look that up. All right, anyway, so here's the Didache, or the teachings of the 12 apostles. And it begins like this. It says, now pause for a second. Just like the New Testament is not broken up into John 1:12, John 1:13, it isn't broken up like that. We have done that later with these texts. We've labeled them and enumerated them, so they're easier to refer to when we're doing studies and talking about them. This is not enumerated either, but it has been, since for ease of reference. But this is called chapter 1, but it doesn't say chapter 1 in the original text. It says in the text, the two ways, W-A-Y-S. The Jesus movement, way before it became Christianity, when it was still a Jewish movement, the Jewish movement in the book of Acts in our New Testament is called the Way, W-A-Y, followers of the Way. That's what they were called. Interestingly enough, the followers of the Essenes were also called followers of the Way. So it says, there are two ways. One is the way of life, and one is the way of death. And there is a great difference between these two ways. Opening sentence of the teachings. Now, some of these teachings I'm about to read will sound really familiar to those of you who are Christian or at least familiar with the New Testament. The way of life is this. Sorry for the clicking noise here. I'm taking them out of a notebook, my reference sheet, so I can actually read it. The way of life is this. First of all, you shall love the Lord God who made you. That's the first. Second, love your neighbor as yourself. Now I'm going to pause right there because for those who are familiar with the New Testament, when Yeshua was asked out of the 613 different spiritual laws in the Jewish Bible, what was the most important teaching? And Yeshua said, the most important teaching is love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, with all your heart and soul and strength. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus was not inventing those. Those did not originate with Jesus. He is quoting Moses. The love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength is from Deuteronomy 4:6-9. And the love your neighbor as yourself is Leviticus, I believe, 19:18. Shirley can probably correct me on that if I'm wrong, but I think that's where that one is. But Jesus was quoting the teachings of Moses and saying that those two were the central teachings of all, of everything that was the core of everything. And that's what this says, this teachings of the apostles, the same thing. I'm going to continue reading and quoting now. And all things that you would not want done to you, do not ever do to another person. So there's basically a variation of the so-called golden rule, which was another thing that Yeshua taught, which was also another thing that a great teacher during his time called Hillel also taught. So you have the great Jewish rabbi Hillel teaching this in the negative version, do not do unto others what you would not want done to you. And Jesus teaching, do unto others in a positive frame, what you would want done to you. And then you have the Didache basically saying the same thing in slightly a different version. All things that you would not want done to you, do not ever do to another person. That's the summary of the core teachings right there in the Didache. I'm going to continue quoting now. Now, the teachings of these words means this. Bless those who curse you. Pray for your enemies. We've heard that in the New Testament from Jesus also. And then this we didn't hear in the New Testament. And fast for those who persecute you. So that's one we haven't heard in the New Testament. Now, this one is another direct quote from Jesus. For what credit is it to you if you love only those who love you? Even the nations do the same. Now, the word the nations here might seem strange to you, but in ancient Jewish writings, including in the time of Jesus, there were the Jews, and then there were the non-Jews, which was everybody else. And the non-Jews in English are referred to as Gentiles. And in Judaism, in Hebrew, the non-Jews were called Goyim. And often that's translated as the nations or the people of the nations. But it's to indicate non-Jewish people. Okay, moving on, quoting again. You should love those who hate you, and you will not have an enemy. Abstain from desires of the flesh and body. So that's, again, not something we've directly heard in the New Testament. And then going on, it says, if anyone strikes you on your right cheek, turn the other cheek to him also, and you will therefore be perfect. If anyone compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. If anyone takes your coat, give him your shirt also. If anyone takes something that is yours, do not demand its return, for you cannot. To anyone who asks something of you, give it to them, and do not ask for it back. The Father desires that gifts be given from his own riches. So I'm going to pause there for a minute. A variation of that, again, is in the Sermon on the Mount in the New Testament, which is Matthew 5 through 7, that section. That is quoted a great deal in Christianity. And what I'm about to say may be not sit well with some of you. That is quoted very frequently as evidence that Jesus was a pacifist. Not just that he was nonviolent, but that he was a pacifist. And that if somebody struck you, you should turn the other cheek and let them strike you again, and so on. That it was kind of the epitome of Gandhi's ahimsa, nonviolence sort of thing, and that you were not supposed to resist, you're just supposed to take it. Both Gandhi's nonviolent movement and Yeshua's movement have been mischaracterized because of passages like this. Gandhi was not passive by any stretch of the imagination. He was not non-confrontational. Neither was Yeshua. And both of them consistently stood up to injustice and advocated that their followers did the same. What Gandhi advocated was nonviolent resistance, not no resistance. And what Yeshua advocated was nonviolent resistance, not no resistance. And there's a huge difference between those two. In fact, if you know the context in which these occurred, it makes even more sense that that's what they were actually saying, not saying, just take it. They were never saying that, and neither did Yeshua. So let me clarify a bit of that for a second. The part that says, if anyone compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. What does that mean? How many people in your life today come up to you and make you go somewhere for a mile? Well, that doesn't happen. How many people come up and take your coat and expect you to give it to them? How many people, do you follow what I'm saying? What is this about? This is about Roman occupation of Israel. Under Roman law, when they occupied a nation like they did Israel, there were several things soldiers were allowed to do legally. Many of them. One was force you to put them up in their homes. That's not mentioned here. Another was they could compel any Jew, no matter what the Jewish status was, even priests and whatnot, they could compel any Jew to carry a burden for the Roman army or for a Roman soldier up to 1 mile, but not past that. It would have been illegal for them to force you to carry heavy burdens. If they were moving an army or moving supplies, or even individual soldiers were moving things, they could compel Jews to carry all those things for them for up to 1 mile in length, but not beyond that. That would have been a violation. So that's where the why the 1 mile comes in. The other thing they could do, if they needed warmth because it was cold out, they could compel a person, a Jew, to give them their coat, their outer garment. to keep them warm. And they didn't give it back. It wasn't like borrowing it. They just took it, and you had to give it to them. And whatever they took from you, if they took other stuff, if they took grain that you just harvested from the field, they could do that. If they took money from you, they could do that. If they took an ox or a donkey from you, they could do that. If they took it from you, you could not get it back. So when it says if somebody takes something that is yours, don't demand its return because you cannot. Well, that's kind of what does that mean? It means that if the Roman takes something from you and you demand it back, you are going to die, and probably so is your family. So don't do it. Let them have it. Now, the other part that people think is, again, the nonviolence part too, is it says, if somebody strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other cheek to him also. This is not acceptance. This is not allowing people to do that to you. This is active defiance. And the reason it's defiance is this, and it's a very physical thing. If you imagine that I'm right-handed and you're right-handed, actually I'm not, but imagine that I am right-handed and you are right-handed, because back then and now, something like 90% of the world is right-handed. Left-handed people are by far in the minority and have always been. I don't know the actual percentage, but it's hugely right-handed. So imagine that we're squared off and we're actually going to fight, like have a physical altercation. And I strike you with my right hand. If you're standing facing me, do you know what cheek I end up hitting with my right hand? Not your right cheek. I can't possibly hit your right cheek. I hit your left cheek. If you're over here and your right hand is coming to me, you're going to hit me on my left cheek, not on my right cheek. You can't do it. It's not in you can't, you'd have to come back this way. And that's the whole point. It is a backhanded slap that's being talked about, not an attack. It's an insult that's being talked about. And Romans frequently do this, and it's been written about in that era a lot, that Romans liked insulting Jews, particularly in front of their family, particularly at synagogues or at the temple, and particularly in places where it'd be usually embarrassing to them, especially prominent people or well-liked or well-known people. They would take their right hand and smack the man on his right cheek, meaning they're backhanding him. That's how they can hit the right cheek with their right hand. They're backhanding, slapping them. And what Jesus is saying is when somebody slaps you like that, instead of being humiliated and putting your head down, just standing there, stand up and go ahead and hit the other one. Go ahead. It was an act of defiance, not compliance. So this whole thing has been radically misinterpreted. And uh, and and it's not just my opinion that thinks so. Lots of biblical scholars know this, but it's not talked about much because it goes contrary again to the image we have. And again, Gandhi and his people stood up, but they did not use violence. What he doesn't say here is if somebody insults you and slaps you on your right cheek, then just pound the tar out of him. He doesn't say that either. He's not talking about acting in violence, but he is talking about defiance and not complying. So it is misconstrued, in my opinion. And I think it's an important one. There are many others in the New Testament that if you see Jesus primarily as this peaceable, non-confrontational doormat, which he was not, but if you see him that way, then there are other things we're going to get to also that may be unsettling because he absolutely wasn't. And he absolutely did believe in self-defense, as does Jewish law, which became the basis of English common law, which became the basis of our law. And self-defense has been existent as a right ever since then. But that's another story. So back to this now. I'm quoting. I'm just checking to see if anybody has anything yet. Okay. Blessed is he who gives charitably according to the commandment, for he is blameless. Now listen to this part. Woe to the one who receives. If a person is needy and receives charity, then that person is blameless. But if someone is not truly in need and receives charity, he will be called to account for having received it. So a lot of the fraud things that are going on with certain systems in this country, and a lot of the people, even on the web, using sites to raise money that aren't really, I mean, lots are legitimate, of course, but there are people out there raising money under false pretenses. That would fit into this category that's being talked about here. And it says, such people will become imprisoned as a result of their actions, and they will not be released until they paid every last cent. So even in ancient Israel, this was not an allowable practice. This is an interesting saying that's not in the New Testament. We have been told, let your alms, meaning your offerings to the poor or to charitable works, let your alms continue to sweat in your hands until you have discerned whom God wants you to give them to. So now all of a sudden, it's not just you deciding what to do with your money, it's you trying to pay attention inside to do what God is asking you to do with that money. Okay, so I'm going to pause there for a moment. That's just the intro part one of the way of life. I'm going to pause a second, see if anybody has any questions or comments, and if not, I'll go on to the next part. Okey-dokey. So this is now called the second commandment. The second commandment of the teaching is this, and you're going to recognize a lot of these. You shall not commit murder. That is what, by the way, in the so-called Ten Commandments, it does not say, thou shalt not kill. It has never said that. In Hebrew, the word used there is murder, and they made a distinction between murder and killing, which so does our law, so does English common law, so does ancient Jewish law, and many other laws around the world. You shall not commit adultery. In addition to that, you shall not be sexually perverse. You shall not be sexually promiscuous. You shall not steal. You shall not practice magic or sorcery. You shall not ever murder a child by abortion or kill it at birth. You shall not covet your neighbor's things. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not speak evil or even bear a grudge. You shall not be double-tongued, because a double tongue is a snare of death. Your words shall not be false, but they shall be considered to be empty until they're fulfilled by your actions. Doing is a big thing in Judaism. Believing something that you don't act on is not considered faith in Judaism. You shall not be greedy or a swindler or a hypocrite or bad-tempered or proud. You shall never plot against your neighbor. You shall not hate any person, but you must be willing to reprove and correct some. You shall pray for others, and you shall love others as much as your own life. That's what's called the second commandment in the Didache. So those, as you can see, are very similar to, it's kind of a combination of things taught in the Jewish Bible, Hebrew Bible, in the Mosaic era, usually as part of the Ten Commandments, and then also somewhere some of the things that Yeshua taught as well put in there. So moving on.
Hey, Stephen, this
Yeah,
is Liz.
please. Hi, Liz, go ahead.
I am just not up to date on. I don't know if in the Jewish faith that
Mhm,
abortion's considered
mhm,
killing.
mhm.
It is.
Uh, well, yes, it is.
Okay.
And does that mean that all Jews are anti-abortion? No, especially not today. But originally, yes, because abortion was possible back then also. It often ended up killing the mother as well as the child, but they had multiple ways to do abortions back then, both physically and through the use of ingesting certain things like mistletoe and other herbal things that would likely induce an abortion. But yeah, anytime. the human life is considered sacred, and of all the Jewish laws, all human life, whether it's in a womb or out of a womb, and whether what all Jewish laws, the laws of Sabbath, the laws of this and that, all Jewish laws, the supreme Jewish law is that any law at all in Judaism can be broken if it's for the purpose of saving a life. You can lie, you can steal, you can kill somebody, if it saves a life. Because as I said, self-defense, for example, is a part of that teaching as well. So as far as is abortion written about extensively in the actual the Hebrew Bible? No. But would Jews today, I have no idea how many support and don't support abortion. It's a divisive issue among Jews today as it is among most everybody else. But
Stephen, I wanted
yeah,
to weigh in.
yeah.
One of the Roman, and I don't know how far back it goes, but they're famous for it. One of the Roman ideas of, I don't know, of birth is they would expose children. It talks about children killing children
Yeah.
or an infant right after birth. If there was any physical defect noted, or even if they were just simply unwanted, they were literally taken out and dumped on a trash heap and
Yeah.
left at birth.
And sometimes burnt, sometimes set on fire.
Yeah. So that could also have been some of the
background of that, right? Sure. Absolutely could. So that does not appear as such in the New Testament, that particular kind of passage. That's a good question.
I have follow-up questions.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I can remember them anymore. Sorry. So and again, I'm no expert on any of this. So when Christians say it's against the Bible, abortion against the Bible, is that where they're getting it from?
That's a good question. I don't know where they're getting it from. It could be that. Some Christians take it from the wrongly translated "thou shalt not kill," and abortion clearly is killing. So they say shouldn't do it for that reason. Some do it because in various places in the Bible, while it doesn't say that in these words, it communicates clearly that life is considered precious and sacred, so you shouldn't take it. And but I don't know. I've never heard a Christian quote a biblical passage. I'm not saying that there aren't any. I just haven't heard a Christian quote, an anti-abortion Christian quote a biblical passage saying, here's what it says, and we shouldn't do it for that reason. I'm not really, to be honest, I'm not really up on either the politics of abortion or the arguments for and against abortion as it's being presented right now. But a big argument in that whole field is when life begins.
Right.
And prior to the modern technology we have now that enables us to see the formation of the fetus, it was considered that it began at birth. Well, clearly it begins long before that, and we can see that now, where they didn't used to be able to see that. But so it used to be considered birth was the beginning of life. And then Catholics, for example, not in the Bible, but in Catholic catechism, Catholic documents say that birth begins at the moment of conception, before there's even any fetus, that birth begins when the sperm and egg unite. So different religions have different views on when life starts. And of course, that then affects the abortion issue of, is there a point at which there's been conception, but there's not a human life there yet? And therefore, if that's a concern to you spiritually, then it would be okay to abort at that point, versus if it is a concern to you spiritually, it wouldn't be okay after that point. So it gets to be a very complicated argument, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Can we get Rafi? I've got another question, but can we get Rafi to jump up and say hi and see his face?
Come here, Rob.
He was right there.
He is. Let me
Bubby.
back up a little bit. Hey, Rob, come over here. Okay, look, up, put your face up. There he is.
Part of him. Part of him. Hi,
Yeah,
Ryan.
my
Oh,
camera is so high, I can't quite get
it's
it
all
low enough.
over his face. Okay. Sorry.
I
Sorry.
can't quite get
I
it
need to
low
get
enough to catch him.
need to get my dog hit.
Yeah, sure.
Um, well, my other just, and we don't have to go into this at any kind of length, but um, two other comments. One is that for whatever it's worth, and I'm in the state of Ohio, and the state of Ohio, we actually had a vote here and made it legal for abortion to be in Ohio, but our legislators are basically dicking around with that, not to make a too weird of a joke there, but sorry, your mouth is full of tea. We'll see Stephen do a
Yeah,
tea
T on the camera, right?
yeah. Um, one of the things that they call it is something called the heartbeat bill, about 6 weeks. And at 6 weeks, there is no heart.
Mhm.
There's heart tissue that jiggles.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get, what is that called when they do the scan and they say, oh, here's the baby's heartbeat.
Ultrasound.
If you do the ultrasound,
Yeah.
the machine is actually translating that noise. There is no heartbeat. It's translating that jiggle into something that it creates a heartbeat sound. Anyway, it's just politics and details, but
Yeah.
but people get really sucked into that. Oh, there's a heartbeat at 6 weeks. There's not a heartbeat. But anyway,
Well, that actually is not factual.
there's
That
cardiac jiggling.
that's actually not factual. That's an opinion based on somebody watching what is going on. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that
Well,
actually is not medically established. That is somebody's opinion who is looking at the machine and looking at the ultrasound and looking at the tissue. My heart jiggles too, so does yours. It's called a heartbeat. So that's how it works. It pumps and jiggles. So the fact that the muscle is moving in rhythm technically might not be a heartbeat, but it's kind of an absurd argument because if it's pulsing in rhythm and it's heart tissue, then what is it if it's not a heartbeat? A jiggle?
but
I mean, it's not a twitch. It's not a one-time twitch. It doesn't go boop and then stop like a muscle twitch. So
I don't want to get into a long argument with
yeah,
you because the heart could not sustain itself if it stopped at that.
That's a completely different statement than you just made. Completely different. Sustainability is nothing to do with whether it's a jiggle or
I do want to say clearly, there is nothing that sounds like a heartbeat coming from that infant. That the machine makes an artificial sound, and that's true. That is true. There is no.
That is true.
Yeah, the truth. And so the parents.
That's like all these. Yeah, that is true. That's like all these machines that hook up plants, and you hear the plant, the energy of the plant moving. You don't actually. It's just electrical impulses. There's no sound to that, but it's translated through an audio system. I agree with that part. Absolutely.
So there's no fully formed heartbeat happening. We're gonna agree on that. There's no fully formed heartbeat happening at 6 weeks.
I'm not going to agree on that. I'm going to agree that the sound is translated by the machine. Yeah, for sure.
It's not an adult heartbeat that's happening at that stage of 6 weeks old. It's not
absolutely
the same thing.
Absolutely not an adult heartbeat.
Right.
No.
It's not a fully formed heart because it's tissue.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I'm going to continue.
Yeah, but what kind of tissue is it?
Heart tissue, but it's not formed. It's not fully formed.
Yeah. So if I have a child that's born without one arm, is that okay because they're not fully formed to get rid of them?
That's apples and oranges. That's completely different.
Think about that. You're saying not full formation is a reason that justifies.
No, I'm not saying that at all. I want to finish with this because I want to say
sure. Yeah. Let's do. I just want to be whether it's a spiritual issue or physical.
That is not my argument. You misunderstood me. That's not my argument.
Okay, well, then I misunderstood.
What I want to say.
Sure.
What I want to say is what Jim Gordon talked about in Path of Sound and Light kind of ideas.
Yeah.
I asked him about abortion, and he said his understanding is that when the baby's still, that life begins, that the soul, that while the woman is pregnant, the soul hovers around the baby, around the mom.
Right.
It doesn't go into the child.
Right.
When the child takes its first breath, that's when that child is a person.
Right.
So that's his understanding. So the mother has dominion up until that point. The child is part of her body.
Yeah,
the embryo is part of her body, and she has the choices to make for that. So that's
yeah,
what he said.
yeah. I remember Jim saying that. I don't agree with him, but I agree with him on part of that. I think he's right that the soul itself has an energy stream that connects to the embryo. He didn't mention this part, but he does know this because he's talked about it before. The
Hmm.
the soul, it's called the silver cord in the Bible.
Uh-huh.
There is an energy projection from the soul that comes forth into the top, through the top of the head, into the child. And it anchors actually at about 3 months into the heart tissue of that child. That's called the silver cord. So the soul is connected in the womb at that point, once that cord, energetic cord is connected. This is not medical or biological because they've
Right,
never
right.
found this yet. But that's what Jim, I mean, he knows that too. But um, at that point, the soul can withdraw that energy cord at any time prior
Mm-hmm.
to and up to the birth. It can be stillborn, and that has been
Hmm.
disconnected.
Hmm.
Once it's born, if that silver cord has not been disconnected, then the life energy continues to flow into that body. And when the breath happens, is when the soul is actually anchored into the body with the first breath. I totally agree
Hmm.
with him on that, just
Okay.
100%. The part that I disagree with is the fact that something is in the mother's body does not mean it is only her choice. And that's another abortion issue that people have, a lot of divisive ideas on. And so if if there's a lot of moral um, uh, complications to all of this, obviously. If we say that the mother has the right, for example, to because the child is not born yet, and therefore it's her body, and so she can do what she wants with it, and that includes killing the forming child. She has a right to do that. Then, if she has a right to do that while the child is viable, she has a right to take its life while it is viable, while it's still inside her. Why does that right end when it's immediately outside her? Why doesn't she still have that right? It's her child.
It's not part of her body anymore.
When it comes
Well,
out, it's still connected by the umbilical cord. It's still part of her body.
for minutes, yeah.
Oh, sometimes way longer than that. Um,
Anyway, yeah. It's
yeah.
yeah.
So there are complications to all of that for sure. And I'm not saying I know the right answer to that. It's a very difficult thing. The the if you legislate things so that women who are going to die if they don't have abortion can't have an
Right, right.
abortion,
And that's
that's
happening right now. That's happening all over the country right now.
it's actually not. It's happening
It
in a few
is.
places. Well,
Stephen,
yes,
it is.
I know what you listen to, and I know what you believe about that. But the whether it's happening or not, that's terrible. It shouldn't happen at all. But the converse of that is, if the attitude is the mother can do whatever they want with the child in their womb whenever they want, because if it's far enough along, um, and they decide not to have it, many of the abortions are performed outside the body, and the child is killed outside the body. So, and then you get into all these complicated things. Is it okay if they kill it as soon as it comes out? Is that all right? Is it okay, if they kill it as it's coming out? There's all these different issues to it. So it gets
I
very
want, I want,
complicated.
I want to make a point that is happening since
Sure,
Roe v. Wade got reversed.
sure.
What's happening? I know what's happening in Ohio and many other states. So there are women with wanted pregnancies. There's a
Hmm.
women who want their babies, who are miscarrying, who
Hmm.
go to ERs and they're
Yes,
hemorrhaging and they're told go home
yes,
because the doctors in that state are told they'll go to jail if they do something
yes,
called
yes.
abortion. And
Yeah,
as the process is a DNC, whether it's abortion or whether it's
right,
helping a woman who's
right.
miscarrying,
Right.
and the doctors are terrified and women are dying. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we're not gonna, yeah, so that's
Yeah, it's
happening.
horrible. That's horrible. Yeah, I'm totally agree with that's horrible. The the reality is that there's a lot of horrible things going on. That's one of them. And the uh, mo legislating legislating things that have moral components to them is really difficult Because again, if you prohibit women from doing that, then you end up with the situation you're talking about. If you allow women to do it whenever they want without any cause, then you have a whole other problem, the social problem that occurs. And so it's a tough issue. There are a lot of tough issues. Euthanasia on the other end of the spectrum, you have some old guy who's dying. He's never going to get better. He's in horrible pain, but he's not actively dying. But he's never going to get better, and he's in horrible pain. He's in so much pain, he wants to die, and you're not allowed to let him die. The doctors are forced to keep him alive.
Mhm.
That's another horrible. I mean, that person's in hell. That's
Mhm.
another horrible thing. We put down animals who are suffering, but not people we love. But then if you legislate that it's okay to euthanize people, who are terminally ill and in a lot of pain and want to be euthanized, then you have the whole thing. Are they in their right mind? What if their son's trying to get their inheritance and their son says, "Yeah, sure, go pull the plug"? I mean, it's these black and white answers to all these things are really hard to find.
Right,
I'm gonna I'm gonna quit talking here and let
I,
you
I, I
continue.
want to say one last thing because
Sure.
in Holland, my family's Dutch, and in Holland they have euthanasia for people.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's legal there. So this happened with both my mother's sister and her brother-in-law that they got to be very old. The decision is made years before you die. You have a conversation with your doctor. You have to meet a whole bunch of
Sure.
criteria before this
Sure.
happens. You have to be, super, it's a big deal. They don't do this, and you
Yeah, I
have to
know.
be really
Yeah.
you have to be really at the end of your life.
Yeah.
And I know my cousin said that they were put to sleep essentially, and it can take days for that person to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so anyway, it does exist, and it is
It
regulated
does. It
there.
does. It exists in New York right now too, under certain
New
conditions.
York?
Yeah, in some
Really?
conditions, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, thank you.
Anyway, go
Thank
ahead.
you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Go ahead. So, Unison 10.
Well, after all of that, this is seems kind of late to throw in, but um, from personal experience, observation, I don't know what to call it. I will support what Jim says about the soul coming into the body,
Mhm.
that it does hover around the
Mhm.
woman
Mhm.
be and then connects at the point of breath.
Yeah. It- yeah, that's great.
I, I
That's my experience too, with the exception of the anchoring happens at birth, but the connection happens before birth. But
yeah,
but again, if that's not what you've experienced, then it's not, and it is what I've experienced. So, that's there when there's a decision made for a soul to come in to a particular mom, and in a particular environment at a particular time, that soul has been hovering around a long time before the conception ever occurs. They're checking out the mom, the father, they're checking out the life situation, the timing of other souls that are coming in that they need to interact with in their lifetime. There's a lot of
thinking
complex.
about the conception and
Yeah, yeah, right.
or past the time of conception. I'm
Yeah, yeah,
just
right,
referring to
right, 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 right. Exactly, exactly.
the
Yeah,
arrangements
yeah,
quickly and everything else.
yeah, yeah.
I don't
Um,
remember that part.
So let me go on with one other piece here, and then we'll see if anybody else has anything. But as you can tell, spiritual teachings are not just confined to the realms of spirit. Spiritual teachings affect our lives. So if you have a spiritual teaching that you're not to kill a child in the womb and you're not to kill a child when it's at birth, and that's a teaching, that's not just a nebulous idea that we can go, oh, that's what I like. I like it, I don't like it. These spiritual teachings have real impact in real lives, dramatic impact sometimes. So getting the spiritual teachings right and understanding them correctly is helpful in how to apply them, because that's what they're for. The spiritual teachings are for application in our lives, and they do impact our lives. And just this little back and forth with Liz on things, can be a very charged, and lots of things besides abortion are very highly charged issues that have moral components or spiritual components to them. And if we look to spiritual teachings for answers, we will sometimes find answers that support our positions, and we'll sometimes find answers that don't support our positions. And then we make choices. Well, this isn't what Yeshua said, it isn't what the Bible said, it isn't what Buddha said, whatever. But we're going to do it anyway. Or it is what it said, and that's what I think too. Or it is what they said, and it's not what I think. But I guess I'll do it anyway. So there's a very human, realistic component to all of these spiritual teachings, not just the abortion aspect, but to all of these dietary aspects, how you treat your neighbors, how you treat your family, um, how you interact with people in authority over you. Those are all genuine things that really affect people's lives. So anyway, Nahum and Shuli, go ahead.
Hi. I want to support what you're saying about they affect our lives. I've known people who, when they were young, chose to have an abortion.
Yeah,
One
me too.
person in particular who then had a horrible time getting pregnant
Mhm.
once she was in a relationship with wanted a child.
Yeah,
You know, many times we don't know what's going to happen in our lives.
that's right.
And people make decisions from a very narrow place. Again, here's looking at a more spacious
Yeah,
perspective. When we look at these difficult kinds of choices to make, it's always good to sit down with somebody and have a much more spacious perspective.
oh, absolutely. And you're so good at that. Yeah, really good at that. I agree with you. I actually know, to go back to the abortion thing again, I actually know a woman who, from a young age, in her very early 20s, used abortion as birth control. She's had 5 abortions, none of which were medically necessary. She just didn't want the child, and she didn't use any birth control. So if she got pregnant, she would just abort the child.
Yeah. And my own experience, having had carried children,
Mhm.
personally, I couldn't have done it
Right.
because I made connection with that
Yeah.
baby almost immediately, you know, from the time I figured out I was pregnant.
I know being a father is nothing like being a mother and carrying it, but both of my biological sons, I had strong connections with while they're in the womb. I absolutely did. Yeah. And so yeah. But anyway,
Yeah,
but
with Tori and Shuli, I knew one of my kids was suffering. I
yeah,
knew somebody had a problem. I did not know which until
that
they
was
were born.
you. I know.
That was me.
That was her, and she had to
Yeah.
have that surgery at 19 months. Yet
Yeah.
I know people who have made different choices from me, and I support
Yeah. Yeah.
the individuals.
Yeah.
They have to make their own choices, and then we have to live with our choices.
That's what I was going to say is people have a right to make their own choices. And when they make choices, there are sometimes consequences they don't realize. Whatever choice they make, there are consequences that they may not know are coming when they make the choice, that they're going to have to deal with, whether they keep the child, whether they don't keep. And again, even removing it from the abortion issue itself, just life choices about who to marry, whether to divorce, whether to have children, whether not to have children, to take this job or not that job. We make choices all the time that have long-lasting impact on our lives, and sometimes we can't see the result of what our choices are all the results of what our choices are going to be when we make them. Yeah, so
Right, exactly. And I mean, I can give a personal example in my first marriage with
mhm,
my ex-husband who was an alcoholic.
mhm.
And I realized when I was pregnant, I could not, you know, once I gave birth, I couldn't raise my first set of twins
Yeah,
in that environment.
yeah,
So I had very hard choices to make
you
because I
did.
couldn't stay in that environment.
You did.
And because of it, but yet I've looked back and I'm so grateful I didn't go the route of terminating
Oh
that
yeah.
pregnant.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so different people make somebody else who was in that kind of marriage might have made it the other
Sure,
choice.
sure, sure.
And so we all have to make our choices and we all have to live with. And I was not making a lot of money when I first got divorced, you know. And so there are challenges.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, there sure are. It's
Yeah, and from a spiritual perspective,
yeah.
those are some of our lessons in life.
Right. Exactly.
You know, this is my opportunity now to live and grow.
And again, from the broader lens that you talk about, sometimes in situations like this, even like what you're talking about with the carrying the child or not carrying the child, um, if we look at it from a bigger perspective than just the mother or just that child, there is often a spiritual contract between the mother and child for this very dilemma, and that both souls are going to learn something from that dilemma. It's not an accident, is what I'm saying, that these things occur. We get put in situations all the time that are very uncomfortable for us, and they're not random. And there's a reason we're facing the things we're all facing, whatever those things are, whether they're financial struggles or health struggles, or they don't just kind of randomly come and go. There's, at least from my perspective, there's meaning behind those things and lessons we're supposed to learn and figure out through all of those. So it's not so much a matter of what's always right and always wrong in this situation as what's my lesson in this situation.
I ask that a lot in my life.
Yeah,
What's
boy, me too. Me too.
learning from this? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nahama. Appreciate it.
Oh,
So,
and
Julie, go
quickly,
ahead, dear.
very quickly for Auntie, we've had very bad rain here. Saturday was the worst, and I got soaking wet, so bad timing for getting out of the services. So yeah, I had to change. That's how bad it was. And we apparently beat our record for the most rain in one day in
Oh, wow.
years.
Since 1899.
Since 1899? Phew.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I give you the pouring buckets and the slight thunderstorm, and I'll keep the regular rain. We've had
All
it all.
right. All right. You would have loved it last night because there was no thunder, no lightning. There was just a nice gentle rain all night long, and all our plants and gardens and everything got watered really well, and we didn't have to do it, and it was lovely. So, yeah,
And the plants were dancing this morning.
they were
Yes.
dancing this morning. Yeah, yeah,
So Auntie could do a sigh of relief.
that's right. That's right. All right. Well, thank you both. Love you guys. All right, we went a little over tonight. So next week I'm going to finish off the Didache. It's not a whole lot longer. It's a fairly short document, actually, especially without all my commentary in between. But I will share more commentary next week. We have one tiny piece to figure up on this, and then there's the second part, which is called The Way of Death, which is very short. Then there's a third part, which is on practices that the community had. And interestingly enough, we'll end with this. In the entire document, there is nothing about needing to believe in Jesus as your savior. It's not in there anywhere. So for an early document for the Jesus community, that's another reason it is not accepted in some traditional circles, because that's a critical thing in their faith. And it's not part of this document at all. So anyway, all right. So anyway, thank you all for being here tonight. I sure appreciate it. And feel free to ask questions, even ones that, that I may or may not agree with you on. That's fine, because I don't have the answers. But oh, I hear some puppy barking. Hello, puppy. That sounds like Onyx. Is that Onyx?
Yes.
Oh, hi, Onyx. Recognize your voice, buddy. All right. Well, let's wrap up for the night with just a brief pause. Sorry for going over a few minutes tonight. Appreciate your hanging in there. May you be blessed this week, and may the studies that we're doing help us to draw closer to the one from which we have all come, and help us to draw closer to one another. We thank you for this time together in this community of souls. Amen. Thank you all so much. See you next week, I hope.
Thank you, Stephen and E.
Oh, thank you, Liz. Yep, Ani's in the other room, but she probably heard you. She might have signed off already, but I'll tell her in case she did. Love you guys.
Love you guys.
Bye.